Hello, I'm here with Helen Bennett, one of the founders and the current director of Tzedek Lab. Tzedek Lab is a multiracial network of political education trainers, organizers, spiritual leaders, and cultural workers, Jews and allies established to build collective competency to better politicize, transform, and inspire the Jewish community into collective action against racism, anti-Semitism, and white supremacy. So it sounds like you all don't have very much on your plate. As one of the founders of Tzedek Lab, tell me what inspired you and your co-organizers to take on such an ambitious project.
Great. Yes. Indeed, I'm Helen. It's really so good to be with you, Jordan, and have this conversation. And yeah, it was 2017. Trump was in power, and the system of white supremacy and the movement of white nationalism were really harsh, were showing themselves very much. And we, the three of us, Koach, Fraser, Dev, Kent, and I, who co-founded Tzedek Lab together, we were getting a lot of calls and requests from folks we know out in the world to help make sense of the ways white supremacy was using anti-Semitism and using racism to keep us all more divided. And there was a lot to respond to. We decided that we might try gathering people together and see what they could do in a room together, rather than try and be like the go-to bottleneck people for all these incoming inquiries. And from that beginning time, the goal was always to support the practitioners, support the people who are actively leading, who are in practice taking down these interconnected systems, by making room for them to talk, to learn, to share from their experiences, from their experiments. And what we discovered is that, yeah, it worked to make that space, that people had a lot of questions for each other, that it was more possible to make bolder interventions when people felt more connected. Surprise. So the work, can be very isolating. Jews taking on anti-Semitism, it's really hard.
Light stuff.
Yeah, racism, it's in us, it's everywhere, it's in the water, it's like so terrible. It's just tricky. So we wanted to make it possible for folks to not feel as overwhelmed. And when you're, an organizer in Durham and you're on a call with people in Seattle and Chicago and Philadelphia, it can really change your mood. It can really bring you into a tone of, oh, other people are trying something. So that kind of vision that maybe people being more connected would help was part of our initial vision.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about, let's talk about how you took that vision and are thinking about trying to translate it into what's actually happening in the world. So can you tell me a little bit about Tzedek Lab's theory of change and how you have taken this, connected web of people to catalyze collective action in all those arenas you just described, Jews fighting anti-Semitism, racism, all the easy stuff.
Yeah, the theory of change, when we first gathered, we said from the start, you all are the strategy. It's like the room of 50 people gathered at the Highlander Center in Tennessee, this movement school, movement home. And people were looking around oh, you don't have a big campaign for us to work on together, some kind of plan. They're actually, you all together connected are the plan. And that means, that our theory of change is that we need multiple tactics and strategies to get at the change that we all yearn for. And another kind of layer of it is that we believe that the people who are holding roles in the communities that are doing the work, they know best. So we have folks who are political trainers, political educators, organizers, spiritual leaders, cultural workers, each in different pockets, some working independently, some working in organizations, in different movements, either with the Jews, especially, or not especially with the Jews, but as Jews, some as allies, supporting the work that Jews are doing. And the strategy is to support that those people be more networked together, and that there be space for their struggles and stories to be shared, and celebrations to be celebrated, successes for questions to get offered and answered. And what we've seen is that people are really like leaning into it. So an example of one of the kind of successes is that, or kind of what's been possible through this collective is, in 2018, near the beginning, right around the time when the Tree of Life synagogue shooting in Pittsburgh happened, a lot of folks were talking about what could we do that would be that would support our communities to take on being safer together, community safety, but without relying on police. And people started sharing what they were trying, from Boston to Durham again to, Chicago, different places. People sharing what they were figuring out, what they were trying, inviting others in. And we've had a organizers community of practice that's been a place where people get to check in and share what are we figuring out. And over the last stretch of months, a crew of those folks have actually put together a campaign and are developing a plan for putting out political education and real alternatives to policing for our Jewish communities to use. And I feel like that's the whole point, that there's be a space where like incubation is possible, where ideas can kind of like, get seeded, get nourished, get watered, kind of cycle and strengthen. And now we're, heading into this phase where maybe safety through solidarity won't just be a phrase, but will be something that our Jewish communities can embody. And it's really about like collaboration. We're not really in the business of we should all do one thing. As I was saying, it's a space for cultivating what people are sort of curious about and saying, oh, if you're curious about this, I actually know that someone else over here is curious about that. Y'all should talk and then see. And so that's what's possible. And as the network weaver, I'm behind a lot of the scenes, not knowing totally what all is happening, but getting little pictures and windows and photos. And it seems that people are more and more connected, and that is more and more good.
Yeah, and after, when you all started in 2018, after that super lame election the year before that we had just mentioned, that was like 50 people being connected and talking. And now Tzedek Lab is actually over 300, am I getting that right now? 300 members strong, which is massive and a huge amount of growth, and, mazel tov. What has it been like as a director, founder, et cetera, watching Tzedek Lab grow, and what's become possible thanks to this amazing and growing base of organizers?
Yeah, it has been really profound. We started with that small group, and we're now at 318 members from across Turtle Island and some off Turtle Island, so mostly the US and Canada. And it's been a big sort of rippling feeling of like, small but steady. We model after fractal growth. So if you picture like a fern unfurling, it's like a little at a time. We started with people who we knew, and then each generation of new members have come in through relationships. They've been connected some way or another. And so what we're trying to do is embody this, what feels new, but is actually quite old, this sort of mobilization and collaboration technology, building reciprocity. So reciprocity meaning it's not just like I give and you receive, you give and I receive. It's more three-dimensional. We're trying to weave webs of trusting relationships so that people can rely on each other and use our intuition to say, oh, it might be okay for me to go a little further with you than like what the dominant culture makes me feel, which is like distrust and I probably should stay away, but to go against the stream and say, oh, you are someone connected to someone who I am here for. So I think I'm going to give it a go. So I think I know it's a little bit like a big picture, but what's been made possible is just a sense that we can embody the culture and be the community that we're yearning to build more locally. We're building this network and this web to be a place where people can start to feel like, oh, it might be feasible to lean in with more groundedness and believe that a liberatory world for all of us is possible. And of course, you don't get it 100% right. Every step, every move is a learning. But it feels a little bit bigger, and more a place where imaginations can grow and soar, the more we grow. And it feels really special. People feel like, oh, okay, this like Jewish left network is really here. I think 10 years ago, it was hard to say, like, what is the Jewish left? Is that a thing? And I think between what your work is and what our work is, and like the people who we're in community with, it's more and more here.
Right, and I think it's really, what you're talking about in terms of embodying the values that you want to see in terms of how things change, I think is a really important piece of really a lot of left-wing organization building that I think sometimes, when a lot of times you hear from organizers, there's burnout. They don't feel like these progressive organizations are actually living out their values in terms of how they treat their employees. And that's one of the things I thought was so interesting about Tzedek Lab's work, was not only that it provides organizers with space to plan, learn, and grow together, but it also provides space for them to heal and rest in community. Can you speak about why that's so meaningful to you all and what that helps you accomplish in the long run?
Yes, such a good question.
Thank you.
It feels intuitive that we need places to be our whole selves. There's a way in which the professionalization in our world today means that like you're a certain way at work and you're a certain way not at work. And many of our members are doing this work, their leadership and their practitionershiping, whatever that might be, they're being practitioners sort of as their day jobs and also as volunteers, as just people who are like, I'm committed to this for my life. And so we're not really in like one box when we're in Tzedek Lab, we're in our whole lives. And so it's significant to make room to really say, oh, how's your family? Or, oh, you're handling this other thing, or you're moving, or you're actually changing jobs, but you're shifting into, a new iteration of what you're trying to become, or you're moving from organizing to spiritual leadership. That's so great. Or vice versa, which we see a lot. So it's been meaningful to have space for spiritual care and this touching base and not feeling urgent. I think the culture and sort of pacing of the network is quite a contradiction to the fast-pacedness of organizing culture, and what's needed in organizing culture, which is responding quickly to the needs at hand. And this is a container that says, we're going to actually just be consistent and be here, and we're going to have regular calls and space for spontaneous ad hoc, as needed calls and touch points, but we have regular full network spaces for spiritual care and meeting the moment. And people are so relieved to just kind of always arrive into a small group to connect and meet someone new or reconnect with someone old. And
Right.
knowing that this is lifelong work, we want to say, okay, how can we be cultivating lifelong relationships until, we organize ourselves out of the job and out of the need. But until then,
Right.
we're in
right.
it.
Well, it sounds like that whole value about really taking care of the whole person, that he'll be there, kind of runs through everything. And really, there was a comment in your last grant report that really resonated with me that I think really encapsulated that, which is, as we're learning that hurt people, we are learning that free people. So it sounds like you really believe that this sentiment of allows people to be their whole selves and heal and come to the work fully. it sounds like you feel like that has really bigger implications than just being more effective organizers. So tell me what that saying means and how you all came to that insight. Once again, hurt people, and free people, free people.
Yeah, the hurt people phrase I think came from like therapy world stuff. That's where I first heard it.
Sounds like therapy world. Yep.
And it was actually in 2020 after our network gathering that summer, which was at the height of Black Lives Matter uprising time and COVID. I had just been kind of immersed in like deep dive Zoom world with a profound big group of Tzedek Lab members. And we had tuned into the Allied Media Conference, which is a gathering of movement leaders, really led by Black liberation leaders. And I was just buzzing with the feeling like we were doing something that was moving things forward. And what was it? Like, what was working? Like, what was the buzzing and aliveness about? And somehow that phrasing occurred to me, like, there must be an opposite experience from the hurt people. Like, what is that? I was kind of sitting with like heal people, but it's not quite grammatically, it doesn't quite land. And the feeling
Right.
of free people means to me that once you get a little taste that it could be different, it's what the thing you got to do is bring more people along, because obviously, we're not free alone. That's not how it works. Harriet Tubman like kept coming back into such harsh conditions to keep bringing people. So, she could have just like gone and stayed, but she did not. So it's, just a window into what does it take and how does it feel, and what can a path forward feel like and be like when we're woven more intimately to each other and really at each other's backs.
Yeah, and so if I am a lefty Jewish organizer looking to be more connected to the people in Tzedek Lab, if I've got some free time to think about freeing people, or just want to follow your work, where should I go?
Great question. Most of our work right now is in supporting our member practitioners. So some of that you can see on our website, which is tzedeklab.org. And there is a spot there where you can sign up to join the network when we get there, or to inquire about anything in particular. There's a form there. So those are the places right now where I would say to go. And truthfully, we are also full of members who are also grantees of the Jewish Liberation Fund. So I would also say following the Jewish Liberation Fund's grantees is also a way of following Tzedek Lab members and the work that our folks are doing. I think the other thing would be, if you're curious about analysis, or who's thinking about certain, pieces of how are racism and anti-Semitism hooked together, what's the difference between white supremacy and white nationalism? The Jerusalem Declaration on Anti-Semitism and some emergent projects from them is a good place to look for some of that work. And you can always get in touch with me.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Helen. Appreciate your time, and everyone go check them out in all those places. Later now.